What if I told you the most powerful military on Earth is winning a war and still losing it? Because right now, that's exactly what's happening. The United States and Israel have dominated Iran in the skies. Air defenses have been dismantled, missile systems destroyed, key military targets wiped out with precision. On paper, it looks like a clean and overwhelming victory. But behind the headlines, something far more dangerous is unfolding. Because while America is winning the battle, everyone can see Iran might be winning the war that actually matters. And almost nobody is paying attention to it. Here's where things start to get complicated. This isn't just one war, it's two completely different wars happening at the same time, and they follow entirely different rules. The first war is the obvious one, the military conflict. In that fight, the United States and Israel are clearly ahead. Their technology is superior, their air power is unmatched, their intelligence capabilities allow them to strike with precision almost anywhere. Iran, by comparison, cannot compete in a traditional head-to-head military confrontation, not in the air, not in conventional warfare. But that's not the war Iran is trying to win. The second war is quieter, slower, and far more dangerous. It's a war against the global economy. And in that fight, America is the one under pressure. Because Iran doesn't need to defeat the US military to win. It just needs to outlast it. And that changes everything. At the center of this entire crisis is one narrow stretch of water that most people have never even thought about before. The Strait of Hormuz. It may not look like much on a map. At its narrowest point, it's only about 54 kilometers wide. But through that small corridor flows nearly 20% of the world's oil and gas supply. That's not just important, that's essential. Now here's the part that most people misunderstand. Iran doesn't need to completely shut it down. It doesn't need to deploy a massive navy or permanently block every ship. All it needs to do is create uncertainty. A drone strike every now and then, a missile launch toward a tanker, a few naval mines placed strategically in the water. That alone is enough. Because shipping companies don't operate on bravery, they operate on risk. And insurance companies, even more so. The moment the risk becomes unpredictable, ships stop coming. Insurance providers pull out, costs skyrocket, routes get cancelled. And just like that, without fully closing the strait, Iran can effectively shut it down. No massive fleet required. No constant attacks. Just enough fear to freeze the system. And once that happens, the consequences spread faster than most people realize. The moment oil stops flowing freely through the Strait of Hormuz, everything starts to break. Oil prices have already surged dramatically, and when oil prices rise, it doesn't just affect gas at the pump. It affects everything. Transportation becomes more expensive, food prices go up, manufacturing costs increase, airlines raise ticket prices, shipping slows down. Businesses don't absorb those costs, they pass them on. And that's when inflation starts rising again. Economists have a simple rule: for every $10 increase in oil prices, inflation tends to rise by around 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points. Now think about that. If oil jumps from $60 to $100, that alone can push inflation back into dangerous territory. And if it climbs even higher, now you're no longer just dealing with inflation. You're looking at economic slowdown, possibly even recession. And here's the part that makes this even worse. Even if the conflict ended tomorrow, the damage wouldn't just disappear. Oil production doesn't restart instantly. Tankers aren't in position. Refineries take time to come back online. Supply chains lag behind reality. So the effects of disruption last for weeks, even months. Which means the longer this situation continues, the more pressure builds on the global economy. But here's the twist that most people miss. This isn't an accident. It's strategy. Iran knew from the very beginning that it could not win a conventional war against the United States and Israel. So it didn't even try. Instead, it focused on something far more powerful, something that can't be bombed, destroyed, or intercepted. Geography. You can destroy weapons. You can eliminate military bases. But you cannot change where a country is located. And Iran sits in one of the most strategically important positions on the planet. For decades, US presidents understood this. That's why they avoided direct conflict with Iran. Not because they couldn't win militarily, but because they couldn't control what would happen next. Because once the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, the entire global system starts to shake. And yet, this time, things played out differently. The expectation going into this conflict was simple. A fast operation, a quick collapse, a decisive outcome. But that didn't happen. Instead, the exact opposite happened. The regime didn't fall. It adapted. It hardened. And in some ways it became even more dangerous. Leadership changes that might have opened the door to negotiation instead created a more aggressive stance. More resistance. Less willingness to compromise. And now, Iran has a very simple path to victory. It doesn't need to defeat anyone. It just needs to survive long enough. Long enough for the pressure on the global economy to become unbearable. Long enough for the world to demand an end to the conflict on terms that favor Iran. And that puts the United States in an incredibly difficult position. Because now, there are only 3 realistic options left. And none of them are good. Option 1, negotiate. But negotiating now means doing so from a position of weakness. Because Iran holds the leverage, which means any agreement could look like a loss. Option 2, do nothing. Let the situation continue and hope it stabilizes. But as oil prices rise and economic pressure builds, that becomes politically dangerous very quickly. Because people don't ignore rising costs, they feel them every single day. Option 3, escalate. Force the Strait of Hormuz open. But that path leads somewhere far more dangerous. Because escalation doesn't just mean more airstrikes. It likely means boots on the ground. And that's where everything changes. Iran is not an easy country to invade. Its terrain is harsh. Mountain ranges stretch across its borders. Its size is massive. Its population is large. This wouldn't be a short conflict. Even limited military operations like securing key islands or escorting tankers would require massive resources. Time, money, equipment, and most importantly, risks. Because even if those operations succeed, there's no guarantee they solve the real problem. Iran doesn't need full control of the strait. It just needs to keep it unstable. And that means even a successful military operation might not actually fix anything. Which leads to the real danger in all of this. The threat? This conflict has moved beyond traditional warfare. It's no longer just about military strength. It's about pressure. Economic pressure, political pressure, psychological pressure. And in that kind of conflict, time becomes the most important weapon of all. Every single day that the strait remains unstable, the pressure increases. Markets react, prices rise, governments feel the strain. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to reverse. Even walking away isn't simple. Because Iran doesn't need to win battles. It just needs to keep applying pressure until it gets what it wants. Which means the United States is now stuck in a position where it's not clearly winning. But it can't easily leave either. Not without consequences. And that's what makes this situation so dangerous. This was supposed to be a quick conflict. A show of strength. A decisive outcome. But instead it's turning into something much more complicated. A slow, grinding war of endurance, where victory isn't defined by territory or firepower, but by who can hold on longer. And right now, that answer isn't as clear as it first seemed. Because sometimes, the side that looks like it's losing is actually the one shaping the outcome. And in this case, time might be the most powerful weapon in the entire conflict.